Hello everyone, good morning, and welcome back to the StarCityGames.com Columbus Invitational, the culmination of Season 1 of the SCG Tour. Cedric Phillips, Matthias Hunt, Ryan Overturf, and some guy in a blue sweater who couldn't find a suit this morning.
I mean, I didn't bring a suit.
It's your fault. You should always
I don't
be
own
ready.
a suit.
You should always be ready to do commentary, Todd.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could bring it every weekend and just get tapped once every year and a half or 2 years or whatever.
This is the Luis Scott Vargas treatment, right?
Sure.
This is for the Pro Tours. If he doesn't make top 8, boom, he's in the booth. So you're our LSV.
Great.
Congratulations.
Yes.
There are worse spots to be in. Todd Anderson will be joining us this morning as Patrick Sullivan is a little under the weather, unfortunately, so I don't think he'll be able to join us for Sunday coverage. We wish him the best, obviously, but we've got a suitable replacement here in Todd, the person with the most SCG Tour Open top 8s. So a not bad replacement, I promise you. As we get ready to go over our 4 quarterfinal matchups here this morning, as our Invitational, it started at 757-ish players, our most players we've ever had for an Invitational. It's down to 8. Eventually, it's going to be down to 1. Might be your good friend Jerry Thompson winning this whole thing.
That's my pick.
Yeah, we're going to have to find out.
Shocking.
So, yeah, a big surprise for sure. So we're going to go over our quarterfinal matchups one by one, do a little analysis, make some predictions before we do begin the match that we played this morning. So we are going to start on the right side of our bracket, learn more about these players, and make our predictions. So we will begin here with Jamison Purdue, who is playing a deck you know very well in blue-red control. He's pretty happy about that, I'm sure, against Max McVitie, who is playing mono-white humans. So in this matchup, and I know I was actually a little privy to you testing this matchup in Roanoke with the gang. For Jamison, with blue-red control, this deck, especially being on the play, is pretty potent. So I'm going to start with you, Todd. How do you feel about this matchup for Jamison, especially in the matchup against the very aggressive take on humans in mono-white?
So basically, the blue-red control deck has to just try to kill as many creatures as possible in the early game, try to preserve its life total so that it can find a Chandra or Goggles, stick it, and then use that engine to basically power out the rest of the game. The mono-white deck doesn't have a lot of reach, so if you're able to, pick off their early game, you can usually stabilize with one big spell later in the game.
Okay.
After sideboard, it's going to be a little bit different because he has access to Kozilek's Return, whereas in game 1 he doesn't have access to that. And since we're playing 4 post-board games, that's going to be a big deal.
So without access to Kozilek's Return in the main deck, he's starting Fevered Visions, Matthias. How do you think that's going to affect the matchup? Is he a huge dog game 1? Can he still win game 1? Is he a huge favorite after sideboard?
Well, huge dog may not be the right way to put it, but absolutely, there's been a lot of situations this tournament where we've seen players board in the Fevered Visions package out of the sideboard of the blue-red control deck. I like what Jamison did here. He really took it a step further and said, I'm boarding in so often, how about I just actually start the card and move Kozilek's Return to the main? Unfortunately, this is the one matchup where I think he loses the most by playing the switch. Even with the Fevered Visions in hand game 1, and he has the option of casting it or just not casting it, not casting it might be the right decision here.
Just hang on to it?
I hope you draw a Tormenting Voice and you have a great card to discard too.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair enough. Go ahead.
No. So in game 1, I think one of the issues here is he's won the die roll. So in a regular game, mono-white humans is the deck that benefits the most from being on the play versus the draw. So Jamison getting to go first, and they say in a match where you're starting Kozilek's Return, I think would be really important. Now the problem is here, I don't think he can capitalize on winning that die roll because game 1 is really kind of a liability for him until he gets to use his sideboard.
Now Ryan, we're putting a lot of focus on the blue-red control deck here. How can kind of mono-white win this thing? Because it feels like a lot of people feel like blue-red's going to win.
Sure, the mono-white deck can win the exact same way it wins any other matchup, by casting a bunch of 2/1s for 1, playing a Glorious Anthem effect and attacking for millions of damage.
Okay.
It's going to be difficult for Jamison to interact with that in game 1 until he gets up to 6 mana with Chandra Flamecaller. There's a couple 1-for-1 removal spells in the early game, but game 1 I have to figure that even on the play, this is going to be tough for the control deck. And then the game plan for the mono-white aggressive deck is just to play around the sweepers in the sideboard games. We have deck list, it is the top 8 playoff. He'll have 4 cracks at it, so he does have a good chance at just being able to play conservatively, not overcommitting into a sweeper, even just getting a couple Glorious Anthems and being just on top of a Kozilek's Return. That's going to be the game plan here.
So for this blue-red control deck, Todd, obviously you have the most experience probably of anyone playing it through the 2 weeks. I know you lost in the semifinals in Baltimore to Kellen Pastor. Similar matchup, obviously. You didn't have as much pinpoint removal then. You had those wonderful Eldrazi Obligators that did so much for you over the course of the weekend.
Dude, I was so mad. So I had 4 dead cards in my sideboard, and a Yavimaya that dealt me approximately 30 damage over the course of the tournament. So yeah, so I think the mono-white humans matchup is It's not favorable. I'm not going to say it's favorable. I think it's very close. I think other versions of humans that are a little bit slower, that try to play like Reflector Mage and stuff like that, since they're slower, you have a lot more time to actually, get a leg up on them. They have fewer 1-drops. So, I think just having a few early removal spells against him might not be enough.
Okay.
But Kozilek's Return even might not be enough if he's able to stick Thalia's Lieutenants or always watching to keep his creatures up to about 3 toughness.
Okay.
And then Kozilek's Return doesn't really do all that much. So it'll be interesting to watch. I'm not sure who's going to win.
Yeah, this matchup always feels pretty close. When the mono white deck, well, I'll say this. Whichever side wins, it always feels like it's a destruction. When mono white wins, they destroy you, and you're like, I could never have won. When the blue-red control deck wins, they're using goggles, playing Fall of the Titans for 1,000,000, and then there's no shot for the mono white deck to win, because once blue-red stabilizes, mono white, they're destroying 2-1s. It doesn't even matter at that point. So it'll be interesting to watch. It's a big deal. I think that Jameson is on the play. And as we take a look at our pick'ems here and who we select, for me, I'm going to go with Jameson. One of the reasons for that is because, honestly, I've watched you and Jerry and the rest of the guys from Roanoke test that matchup, and while it does feel pretty close, 5 games, I just don't feel like humans can win 3 of them, honestly.
Really?
I really don't.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to pick humans.
Okay.
I hate going against it, but I think game 1 with the 4 fevered visions, instead of having a little bit more manageable cards against the aggressive decks, I think Fever Visions is a huge liability, and if he doesn't draw a Tormenting Voice to get rid of it, or if he'd just rather pitch like a Drownyard Temple to it so that he can maybe accelerate into a Goggles or a Chandra, he's just going to have this dead card stuck in his hand.
Matthias?
Yeah, you talked about Jameson being on the play, but because of that game 1 configuration, I don't really like Jameson's ability to be able to win the first game. What that means is in the post-war games, Jameson's going to have to win a game on the draw if he doesn't take game 1. And mono white for me, we watched Max McVitie play against Jerry Thompson in that matchup, and it was just each game was player on the play winning, player on the play winning. I'm going to think it goes to 5, but I'm going to give this to Max McVitie.
And Ryan?
I know I'm speaking to a renowned Kithkin master, but I've never cheered for a mono white deck in my life, and I'm not starting today. I'm picking the goggles.
We'll see what Nick Miller
you go with the
is
blue-red
selecting
deck.
here as well. He's going with Jameson. We got 3-2 on blue-red control over mono-white humans. Might go to 5 games too, so that's kind of ironic there. That's kind of the breakdown for that particular matchup. So we'll see how that does shake out, as that's going to be our first match that we do cover in the quarterfinals. Then we take a look at the right side of the bracket again, so we can start analyzing our next matchup here between James, not Jaeger, Wager. Want to make sure I get it right. Not Wager, it's Wager. He's playing Big White. This is the deck that Team Lotus came to this tournament with. And really simply what they did is they said, hey, all the white cards are good, so we're going to put them in a deck. And that's it. It's not the most impressive deck to build, but it's pretty straightforward. Magic isn't about how smart you are sometimes, it's about winning matches. All the white cards are absurd and standard. Put them in a deck, make the mana work. There you go. Number 2 overall seed. It worked for James. For Andrew Main, he is playing green-white tokens, maybe the most innovative deck here in the top 8, because when we get to the left side, it's going to be pretty boring stuff, but he's your number 7 overall seed. So for Big White, for green-white tokens, that's your matchup. Matthias, I am going to start with you. Who do you like? Give me a little bit of a breakdown.
All right, so this is interesting because we have to think, what is this green-white tokens deck? It is certainly, Main's deck is the most innovative one here. It's not like a Cryptolith Right style deck or anything like that. It's actually just a very good value deck. So we're looking at full playsets of Thraben Inspector, Elvish Visionary, Gideon Ally of Zendikar, I believe 3 copies of Nissa Voice of Zendikar.
Yep.
So when I look at that, I'm trying to think of the decks that make cards that make Big White really good. And its removal spells are things like Declaration in Stone, Stasis Snare, and these cards just seem ill-positioned against the green-white tokens deck right now. Now, there's a lot of things going on where if Wager can draw to his finishers, I'm not sure that Main has great ways of, say, dealing with Archangel Avacyn or Archangel of Tides.
Okay.
So it can go either way, but because Wager's the control deck, and I don't think his control cards are very well situated, it's going to be an uphill fight for him, even on the play.
Ryan, how do you feel?
I feel like the big white deck is actually favored here. I think that with the 4 Hangerback Walkers in the tokens deck, the Eldrazi Displacer is very powerful against that, Silkraft's powerful against that, Declaration in Stone good against just any kind of token, and against the Hangerback Walker itself, if they draw a card, whatever, that's not as good as the Hangerback Walker usually. The flyers are huge. The 4 copies of Avacyn, massive. The Archangel of Ties, not just another flyer, a taxing effect for attacking with a lot of creatures is very relevant, and Linval is out of the sideboard, not just another giant flyer, a life swing, 2 creatures of his own to make up some of that advantage on the board against tokens. I like the big white deck here.
He does have Planar Outburst in the sideboard too. That's
right.
Fair.
And also just these Nissa decks on the draw by virtue of seeding. Nissa's a lot less impressive on the draw on turn 3.
Todd, how do you feel about Nissa and kind of the matchup here? Maybe on the green-white side. Any way for green-white to maybe take this thing?
No, I definitely think that green-white has a very good chance, and I think that Thraben Inspector plus Elvish Visionary just gives it a lot of things to do in the early game, so that when you actually get to cast your Nissa, you can tick down on it instead of just making a plant, and actually present like some creatures that can potentially put pressure on them, because no one wants a Eldrazi Displacer, an Elvish Visionary.
This is true.
That's just embarrassing.
Yes.
So if you get like a Gideon Anthem and a Nissa tick down, you actually have a reasonable sized army without actually having to play your Secure the Waste or what have you.
Okay.
I think that the games that the token deck's going to be on the play, I think it's going to be advantaged. Probably going to see Hangerback Walker sided out. Probably see a lot of the removal decks out of the big white deck sided out as well, since they don't have a lot of great targets. But it is going to be difficult for green-white just to beat the gigantic flyers.
Yeah, I think that's the tough part, right? Is it's just going to have a weakness to flyers, and we mentioned Archangel Avacyn, and that's going to be, I think, a pretty tough one to beat. Yeah. Archangel of Ties, depending on how things do line up, and Archangel of Ties and Archangel Avacyn have the ability to really check those Planeswalkers, which I think are pretty important for the green-white deck to be able to kind of do its thing. So the green-white tokens deck, again, probably the most innovative deck in the top 8. We're going to get to all the Bant Company stuff when we look at the other side of the bracket soon enough. For me, as we make our predictions here, I'm leaning towards big white, and the main reason for that is just the power level of the deck. For James, it's just these cards are good.
You mean like Elvish Visionary versus Avacyn?
Yeah.
That we're looking at that?
Sometimes, I'm more like a synergy guy. I like to play Magic most of the time, but sometimes you just hit them over the head with really good cards, and they fold eventually. Like, we've got power versus synergy here, a classic matchup. And sometimes power wins, sometimes synergy wins. This time I'm going with power. How do you feel?
I hate Thragtusk in general.
Yeah,
I just dislike big, stupid, powerful cards.
Okay.
So I'm going to go with tokens.
Just you want the synergy?
Yeah, I want the synergy, man. Always synergy.
All right, fair enough. Matthias?
All right, the big powerful cards, the Archangel of Ties and Archangel Avacyn, are going to be pretty good, but if you look at the sideboard here for Andrew Main, and remember, we're playing mostly sideboarded games, he does have cards like Clip Wings, multiple copies of Dromoka's Command in his sideboard. I think once we get to that point and he can answer the Haymakers, I'm going to like the tokens deck. I'm going with Main.
Right.
I'm a huge Elvish Visionary fan. Say what you will about the other cards, but you can't be more clever than Archangel Avacyn. How do you play around this card? It's obscene having 4 copies of this farce of a Magic card in your deck. That is a huge advantage across this entire top 8 bracket, and I love it in this matchup. I'm going with big white.
Yeah, I think, obviously, the opening weeks of a tournament, and we'll take a look at Nick's pick very quickly here as well, but as you take a look at the opening weeks of a tournament, I saw like Archangel hiding out in the sideboards of some decks, and I'm just like, I don't know when you want that besides every matchup. And I think, as we make our way through the next handful of weeks, this Archangel in the board, juke you, it's just going to be 4 in the main. What are we even doing?
You boarded it in the matchups where Archangel Avacyn's good.
Right? What are we doing as a community? This card's absurd. It's just way too good. I don't know how good it is against your blue-red control deck, but it's good against every deck. I'm sorry. You ever beat this thing?
Yeah, all the time.
I don't believe you. I'm sorry.
Have you seen the card Lightning Axe?
It's good. You better have it, or you're dead.
I always do. Or I don't know, Goggles plus anything.
That's true too. I guess
Fiery Impulse.
Your deck does, I guess, a better job of dealing with it, but I think we're going to see more of it, and probably this matchup quite a bit. So we are going to take a short break here. We want to brace ourselves for all of the Bant Company we're going to have to talk about here in a moment, since there's so much of it on the other side of the bracket. So when we do come back, we'll analyze the other 2 of the matchups. He'll talk about Jerry a lot, because that's really good friend. He thinks he's going to win. And then we'll see what Logan Mize and everybody else can do as well. Ooh, and our coverage partner, Craig Crumbles, in the top 8 too. So quick break here from Columbus. We come back, other side of the bracket.
On May 20th through the 22nd, make plans to be part of Modern Weekend and Magic the Gathering history when StarCityGames.com proudly presents Grand Prix Charlotte. Register for the Modern Format main event to compete for thousands of dollars in prizes and receive an exclusive playmat featuring Jace as he pores over the pages of Tomio's journal. Select the 3-day Infinite Challenge package to compete in all challenge events for one low price, while also walking away with the exclusive Jace playmat. Add a premium rewards package and take home a collectible pin, deck box, 80-count pack of sleeves, and playmat, all featuring the iconic Noble Hierarch. Play in select side events for even more chances to win additional Noble Hierarch pins, deck boxes, sleeves, and playmats all weekend long. And don't forget to come say hello to Grand Prix Charlotte's many special guests, including cosplayer Christine Sprinkle and an artist alley full of fan favorites, headlined by guest of honor Rob Alexander. Be part of Modern Weekend and Magic the Gathering history. Register for Grand Prix Charlotte today.
are back here in Columbus. Cedric Phillips, Todd Anderson, Matthias Hunt, Ryan Overturf for our Columbus Invitational, the culmination of Season 1 of the SCG Tour. As we get ready to look at the other side of the elimination round bracket here for the quarterfinals of the Invitational. And I know at home you're wondering, where's all the Bant Company at? Well,
Here we go.
We found it. Don't worry, it's on the left side, because there's going to be a bunch of it, because the deck's really good, and Ryan Fleischer is one of the people playing it. He's number 4 overall seed with Bant Company, going against Jerry Thompson, who's playing White-Blue Human. So this is an interesting matchup. Ryan, we're going to start with you in just a moment, but on one side you got Bant Company, one could argue the best deck in the format. Jim Davis won Baltimore with it. A ton of people played it here this weekend. On the other side you see White-Blue Humans from Jerry Thompson. Maybe a deck you wouldn't put Jerry on. Maybe you'd expect him to play the blue-red control deck that Todd's playing, or maybe something more mid-rangey. He doesn't always play hyper-aggressive decks, but the thing about Jerry's build of this deck for this weekend is it's not as hyper-aggressive as it may seem given this kind of wacky sideboard he's playing.
Certainly, and there's a strong argument for Bant Company just being the best deck in Standard, and Jerry is going to go ahead and play the white aggressive deck, which is a little odd for Jerry, but he has his own unique build, which is exactly what he does all the time. Yep. So he's going a little bit bigger than the other white decks. He has things like a transformational sideboard almost, with Tragic Arrogance, copies of Gideon Ally as Zendikar. He's ready for this matchup. On paper, it looks rough to me. The Bad Company deck's able to cast Collected Company, get ahead that way, huge tempo swings. He's on the draw this matchup, but Jerry didn't top 8 this event by losing to Bant Company.
Yep,
I guarantee he played this deck at least 2 times in the Swiss, and he didn't do much losing Standard or Modern, but Standard certainly.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable. You know, there's no way if you made top 8 this term you didn't run into this deck, right? There were so many people playing it in day 1 and day 2 of competition. It was the most played deck. This is no surprise. Todd, I'll come to you before we get to Matthias. How do you feel? No bias. No bias. Who do you think is going to win?
That's impossible. That's literally impossible for me. Jerry Thompson, hands down. I saw him beat Bad Company twice. Lost to it once because he made a misplay. I think his deck is very well tuned against it, especially after sideboard, which we get to play a lot of post-board games. Being on the draw, I think is perfectly fine in the matchup because you have access to Naya the White Orchid. Tragic Arrogance is a great card in the matchup. He has a lot of options of things and different routes he can go. He can go bigger. On the play, he can go smaller.
Okay.
Always Watching is a great card in the matchup as well. Reflector Mage on the play is insane. Jerry Thompson.
Matthias, how do we feel?
All right. So let's talk about Jerry Thompson just in general for a second here.
Sure.
He's won 2 invitationals. He's one of the most successful players in the Open Series. And so I've had the pleasure of playing a Jerry Thompson deck before. And if you want to know what his decks generally tend to do, or what he's one of the best in the world at, is if you give him a metagame and say, hey, I need to be able to, against these 3 decks, do really well just next week. Jerry is very good at taking a top tier deck and making it very good for that tournament. Now, you're telling me he's on the side of a bracket where all 3 of his opponents are playing almost the exact 75 that won last week's tournament, and you're telling me that Jerry's going to have a deck that's bad against the championship deck from last week? Like, I just don't believe that.
That's completely reasonable. That is completely reasonable. Here's the thing. Bant Company, even though Jerry's prepared, Bant Company is still just a really good deck. It's got really good cards. It's got, Collected Company, a healthy amount of synergy, Sylvan Advocate, those Creature Lands and Lumbering Falls, pretty good sideboard, a lot of flexibility. Jerry's great. Jerry's obviously fantastic at metagaming, one of the very best when he has to pinpoint on things. But sometimes a deck can just beat you because it's so good. Is there any chance of that happening here?
It's possible. I mean, the reason that Jim Davis won last week with Bant Company, the reason we see 3 of them in the top 8, is that the deck is very powerful. So yeah, it's good draws when, if it's Collected Companies hit double 3 drops all the time. Yeah, Jerry can lose those games, and I'm sure that could be the case. But I just have to think that this is something that in his testing he's played, and he's ready for this. This has got to. I just don't believe it's not a matchup he doesn't want.
Now, Todd, you talk about how he can go kind of low in the games where he's on the play, kind of slower when he's on the draw. Naya the White Orchid can kind of get the initiative back. Like, is there a plan here? Like, do you want to go lower when you're playing against a deck that has, Sylvan Advocate, Bounding Crassus, Reflector Mage, stuff like that? Or is it always just best to go bigger against something like that?
I don't know. I trust Jerry. That's basically just what he told me, is that he's just going to go small on the play and big on the draw. Okay. Basically, he wants to leverage his Knight of the White Orchids as much as possible on the draw. He's going to have access to Bygone Bishop to draw a bunch of cards, Archangel Avacyn, as well as Tragic Arrogance to clean up. But when he's on the play, I think his best shot of winning is to just put the Bant deck on the back foot, hope they stumble on their mana a little bit, since so many of their lands can come into play tapped if they have a little bit of an awkward draw, and just try to leverage the power of Always Watching along with a bunch of 1 and 2 drops.
So is this the kind of thing then where you're saying that he might re-sideboard the deck based on who's winning the die roll?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's so many sideboarded games here, Ryan, where that's probably got to play a role. Now the question, of course, is we have an idea what Jerry's going to do. Do you think there's some way that Bant Company can maybe sideboard differently?
Well, what they can do is play differently. One thing about Jerry's sideboard, he's going to play very well, no question. Jerry Thompson is Jerry Thompson, but not knowing that this white aggressive deck is bringing in Tragic Arrogance is a huge information advantage that he had in the Swiss.
Sure.
When your opponent plays a turn 1 Town Gossip Monger, you don't think that their turn 5 play is Plains Sweeper.
Sure.
Right? A 1-mana 1/1 into a 5-mana Wrath effect, that's unreal. Knowing that that's there in the top 8 is going to be an information advantage that Jerry loses. The ability to sideboard in and out of it is an advantage that Jerry still has, but I think that the Bant deck is able to approach this more carefully and play better around the tools that Jerry has in the top 8.
Well, we do make our selections now. I'm going to take a look. Got to remember what I chose here as we take a look at the pick 'em. I think I chose, yeah, shocking. I chose Jerry.
Yeah, same.
Because if I didn't pick him, he'd probably hate me forever. I do think that, Matthias, your point really rings true here, honestly. He gets to hone in on a couple of decks for the weekend. This is basically his specialty. And, a lot of people have talked about maybe Jerry's results at Pro Tours not being exactly where he wants to be because he's
It's
really
always
good.
an unknown meta.
Yeah, it's very unknown for the most part. In Grand Prix where he's had a lot of success, in SCG Tour events where he had a lot of success, this is what people are playing. These are the best decks. I can poke a hole through that. It appears as that's what he's done this weekend. It's hard to pick against him, especially where you mentioned Bant Company is on all the side of the bracket. If he can't beat that deck, what the heck is he doing here?
Yeah.
You pick Jerry as well?
I also picked Jerry for all the reasons I talked about before.
No. Matthias?
He's tied with Tom Roth at 2 invitational wins, and I got to imagine he wants to break that tie, and it's going to have to start in the top 8 round. I'm picking
Ryan?
Jerry.
With apologies to Jerry, I did pick I did pick Fleischer for this matchup. On paper, it just looks like you can navigate this once you have access to Jerry's 75. Of course, Jerry's not going to make it easy, but it is time to give somebody else a win.
Okay, fair enough. We'll see what Nick decided here. He's going to go with Jerry, so it's 4-1. Ryan is going contrarian here, so we will find out if he is right soon enough as we get to our final match. And this is the other match that we are going to cover. This one's going to be pretty interesting, too. So we have one person here in Craig Krempels who's making all of us look embarrassing as he stops in the booth last weekend and decides, I'm not coming to the booth this week, and I'm just going to top 8 the Invitational. Make all of you coverage guys look like garbage. So thank you, Craig, so much for that. We really appreciate it. Number 8 overall seed. And he's going against Logan Mize, who is playing Bant Company. Logan is such an interesting person on the SCG Tour for me. He lives in Florida. We really don't ever go down there for the SCG Tour events, and he comes up to us. We see him sometimes. We don't get to see him a ton because, from Florida to everywhere else, pretty expensive stuff. But when we do get to see him, I feel like we never see him lose. And he's always playing similar decks. In Modern, for example, if you had to poll anyone in the room, what deck is Logan going to play in Modern? Yeah, Bant Company because he always plays. He's been playing it for a year. And for Standard, it's varied, but whenever he finds a deck that he wants to play, and he's playing Heroic for a really long time, he just stuck with it for the entire time. Now he's playing Bant Company, the best deck in the format on paper, and what I guess the community feels is the best deck. So now you've got a Bant Company mirror. On one side, you've got Craig, who's very accomplished, even though he's in the booth nowadays. On Logan, we don't see him as much. When we do, we see him winning. And from what I've heard from people on the floor, the Bant Company mirror is, well, it's something. It's really something. So I'm going to start with you, Todd. What do you think happens here?
I think they both play a lot of creatures and stare at each other.
Yeah, that's just it.
And then eventually one person has 5 more creatures than the other one, and they're all gigantic, and then they attack. Dude, I don't know. I just walked by in some of the matches in the Open yesterday and just saw 3 or 4 Bant Company mirrors in a row. I was like, what are you doing? Why would you ever want this to happen to you?
No one has any way to break through, it feels like.
No. So Profaner of the Dead would have been a sweet one.
Aaron Barrich had that.
Yeah. We were going hard.
Okay.
We're trying to find anything to break through.
Okay. All right. I know that some players had Eldrazi Displacer too.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different cards that could potentially bust through, but mostly it's just all about leveraging board position, and you want to try to stick as many Reflector Mages as possible early so you can get some chip damage in, and so that you, once you actually do establish a good board presence, an overwhelming board presence, you want to be able to Alpha Strike for the win.
Now, Matthias, when I think of you, I think of creature combat.
Oh yeah,
so
just
this is
5, 6 on each side.
Oh, yeah. This is right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So you tell us how to work through this matchup.
Well, all right. So you're both going to play a bunch of creatures, and then you're going to both have a bunch of creatures, and I guess someone's going to attack at some point. No. What are the differences between their decks? is that Craig is a little bit heavier on cards like Tireless Tracker and Archangel Avacyn, whereas Logan, especially when you look at the sideboard, has a little more removal. I think has extra 1 or 2 Dromoka's commands. But otherwise, we're really looking at a very similar matchup between the two. So
we're looking at something pretty drawn out here, it appears, Ryan. So I'll ask you this, because this is kind of interesting. We are expecting some board stalls here, most likely. Maybe draw first? Is that in the cards here? I don't know if you get crafty like that.
So there were a lot of unintentional draws that we saw at the top of the standings going to the last round of the Invitational. This mirror match is why. If you walked by the Standard Open at all, you saw this happening. Players were getting unintentional draws with this, and that wasn't just these players in the top 8. Happened plenty throughout the standings. That extra card seems to matter a lot more than the tempo, because your opponent's just going to be able to make the tempo back up anyway. You're going to be able to match toe-to-toe most of your cards. You got 3 3s and 2 3s, and the Dromoka's command can make one a little bigger, but then just 2 2 3s is going to be able to brick wall any one creature. The only card that really matters as a card, I guess Collected Company because it's 2 of those things, and Archangel Avacyn because it flies over everything. Avacyn advantage matters more than anything. Having the extra draw to find your Avacyns seems very important. I could see taking the draw in this matchup.
Yeah, if things are going to break down how we think they are, and based off of what we have seen, there's going to be a lot of creature stalls, them staring back at each other, maybe a lot of activations, Dust Watch Recruiter, stuff like that. Maybe you have to get a little bit crafty and find some sort of small edge. Maybe drawing first is appropriate. I mean, you are in the top 8, you have access to the other person's deck list, so you know what kind of tricks they have.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you ever been on the draw against a Reflector Mage when you're playing a creature deck?
I have.
Yeah.
Do you want to change your stance on what you just said about being on the draw?
Well, being on the draw against Reflector Mage isn't a lot of fun.
No.
I will say that it's not particularly fun.
I love extra cards, okay? And I guess if I have to play creatures, I just want to play more of them because cards are great. But no, I mean, the thing about these decks, like, right, these 3-drops are so efficient that I don't know if I want to be a turn behind on playing them. That's
I mean, the easiest way to lose this mirror match is to just fall behind on board, and then every turn you're trying to play catch up, and you're just slowly getting ground into the dirt.
Okay.
And if you're on the draw, that is just slightly more likely to happen, even with the extra card, because you get to a point where sometimes you just can't cast more than 1 spell a turn. So if your opponent company's on the play, they get a Reflector Mage, let's say like a Jace, and so they get to do it again.
Sure.
Yeah, and if you just allow yourself to fall too far behind, being on the draw is a disaster.
So maybe don't draw.
Well, the way that these mirrors are going to break out, kind of like any mirror of very good decks, the games go very different ways depending on how the cards line up. You will have games where one player will run away on the play. The best way to capitalize on having those games go your way is to be on the play, but the games that go long, you could very well finding yourself wanting that extra card. I'm still not convinced.
I want to throw in one more thing here. Okay, so what I see the argument for being on the draw is that I don't want to miss my 4th land drop. I feel like that's a really big disaster. So when you go on the draw, we're more likely to hit our 4th land drop, hit our Collected Companies. But that said, with cards like Duskwatcher Recruit and Tireless Tracker, if I'm on the play, as long as I get up to 4 for my Collected Companies, I think I'm going to make that card back at some point. And what's not saying, the tempo seems really relevant.
Yeah, I can't say if you do choose to draw first, you actively choose to draw and then get annihilated by Reflector Mage, you will probably choose to play the next game.
Yeah,
so I don't know if I want to be results-oriented in the middle of the match, but I can certainly see where you're coming from, where there is the Reflector Mage advantage, where you're trying to catch up and they just mage you, you're probably dead. And you probably can't come back. So we'll see what kind of risks these 2 players choose to take. Now, as far as picking who we think is going to win, I'm picking Logan because he's the #1 overall seed. Not because he gets to play first, because he gets to choose what he wants to do. There, I fixed that. Go ahead.
I'm going to take, was it Craig, right? Yeah, I'm going to take Crimple's fellow commentator.
Okay.
Just because Craig's gas.
Oh, great. Easy pick.
All right. I talked a lot with Logan at the Players' Championship this year. And look, Craig Crimples is a great player in his own right, a very strong player. But one of the things, I mean, I'll say about doing commentary here is when you're talking in the booth, you're not putting in the reps and you're not practicing. And Logan, I think he is hungrier for the win right now. I expect he's got 20 to 30 more matches of this under his belt than Craig does. I'm going to go with Logan Mize.
For Ryan.
Speaking of reps, I would say in the dark, nobody cast more copies of Collected Company in this tournament than Logan Mize. Played it in both formats.
That's a good bet.
He will be casting more in the top 8, no doubt.
That's true.
That said, the advantages that really matter in this matchup, the cards that really matter, at least in game 1, Crimples has the extra Avacyn. He also has an extra tireless tracker that helps him draw more cards, find the Avacyn. I do like the way that Krimpel's deck is situated better, and I'm not sure if player draw is better.
Sure.
So I'm picking Craig.
All right, fair enough. We'll see what Nick does. He's got to break the balance. He's going to go with Logan. So we got 3-2 in favor of Logan Mize, the Florida native. So as we do put a wrap here on this pregame show before our quarterfinals do begin, I'm going to ask you guys one final question on the spot. I'm going to start with Ryan and come all the way back in. Who do you think is going to win the tournament?
Well, it goes against my picks, but I want to say Jerry Thompson.
So you're picking him to lose the quarters and win the tournament. Gonna be tough.
It's a bold strategy.
It is. It is very
We'll see if it works out.
Was this the Ocho now?
Yeah. Matthias, who do you think is going to win?
Don't want to sound too repetitive here, but I'm going to go also with Jerry Thompson. He's got this Bant Company matchup on the one side of the bracket that he starts on that I figure he likes. And we've already seen in the Swiss him beating players like Max McVitie on the other side of the bracket. I could see Jerry taking this down.
Todd, should I even bother?
No.
No?
No, Jerry Thompson all the way.
Yep. It's pretty close to it. I'm going to clean sweep it, and God, Matthias, you did a great job of kind of articulating why. Again, he's paired against Bant Company on the entire side of the bracket. It seems like his White Humans deck with the splash of blue is geared towards beating Bant Company. If he played that deck and is frustrated by getting paired against Bant Company, I don't know what he's doing, and I can't imagine
that's just something
that's
he
true.
wouldn't do.
Yeah, I just can't imagine that's true. And then whatever makes it through on the other side, be it blue-red control, mono white humans, big white or green white tokens, you cross that bridge when you get to it. But presumably, if his deck is good against Bant Company, he's through to the finals maybe pretty easily, and then anything can happen from there.
Right.
So those are our selections. It might be Jerry Thompson's third invitational win. We got to play the matches to find out. So we are all done here in the booth for the pregame show. So we take a short break here from Columbus. We do come back. Todd Anderson and I will be bringing you the quarterfinals. We'll start with Jamison Purdue playing blue-red control against Max McVitie playing mono-white humans. We'll see you guys back here for all of that in just a bit.
On April 23rd and 24th, don't miss the StarCityGames.com State and Provincial Championship.